see later on. So we just want to welcome everybody. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Well, like I said, we may still have a few people hop in. As you come in, your cameras are off and you're muted. So if you want to hop on the chat box, tell us where you are from where you're joining us. And when you do that, just make sure you select everyone on there so that we can all see, not just the panelists, but everybody does that. Just so you know, we are being recorded, and so this will be made available to you later on. So with that, let's go ahead and hit the next slide. All right. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm BeBe Dalton Harrison. I'm the Director of Education at the South Carolina Wildlife Federation. And we have a very special guest for this webinar. This is our Wild Webinar Wednesdays. Yes. So we have Julia Byrd joining us. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about Julia. So we're just so grateful that you've joined us. She has served as the Citizen Science Manager for the South Atlantic Fisheries Management Council, Fishery Management Council, SAFMC, for those of you that like those acronyms, since 2019. And she oversees the council's citizen science efforts. And doing that, she helps connect fishermen, scientists, and other stakeholders to develop and support projects that really address the concerns of the council and their research priorities. So previously, she was the CDAR coordinator for the council and helped coordinate fish stock assessments in the South Atlantic region. And she was a biologist with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, where she worked on a variety of fishery management issues. She's got a BS in biology and environmental studies from Wake Forest, North Carolina, and an MS in environmental studies from the College of Charleston. And she is such a gem, and I've been honored to be able to work with her in the past, and we're so thankful that you're joining us today. All right. So I'm going to just turn it over to Julia. I'm going to go ahead and turn my screen off. Like I said, the webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. I will pop in as needed. And when I pop my face back in, that'll be a sign to Julia that we have a question. And then we'll also have ways to contact us afterwards and some ways to connect afterwards. And again, we'll send a follow-up email with all the information in here. So we invite you to sit back and enjoy the presentation. Thanks, Julia.
Thanks so much, BeBe, and to kind of the South Carolina Wildlife Federation. I'm super excited to be here with y'all this afternoon to talk about one of our citizen science projects, Fishery. And so I will say this is probably one of my favorite projects that I've kind of ever worked on in my career so far. And so what we're really looking at for this project is using old historic fishing photos to help us learn more about kind of what was caught and the size of fish that were caught kind of back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, early 70s, kind of before we had catch monitoring programs in place. And so before getting into things, I first just wanted to say, you know, I'm here presenting on the Fishery project to y'all, but this project wouldn't be possible without so many amazing people who've helped support it. We have a number of partners and volunteers who have helped kind of develop the project, volunteered for the project. Folks at NC State University are helping with data analysis. We have wonderful outreach partners like South Carolina Wildlife who are helping us spread the word about this project, and many folks who've helped kind of fund the project, NOAA Fisheries and the Atlantic Coastal Cooperative Statistics Program. So I just wanted to make sure to give everybody a shout out because the Fishery project wouldn't be what it is without all of these folks making such valuable contributions. And so for the webinar today, at first I thought I'd just share a little bit of information about kind of citizen science and what it is, talk a little bit about kind of who the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council is. So that's who I work for, and then dive into our Fishery Citizen Science Project. And so when I talk about citizen science with folks, I often say kind of the exact definition of citizen science depends a little bit on kind of who you are and where you are. So in general, citizen science is when members of the public kind of work with scientists to collect scientific information. And so there are lots of great examples of citizen science projects that y'all may be familiar with. A lot of people might be familiar with the Christmas bird count that the Audubon Society does, or there are a lot of great projects that monitor things like precipitation or water quality. And then kind of in the fish world, a lot of people are familiar with fish tagging. And so there's lots of great examples of projects kind of throughout South Carolina and really the whole country where members of the public are helping collect really valuable scientific information. And so today I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project that falls under the Council's Citizen Science program, but wanted to provide a little background on kind of who the Council is and what we do. And so in the US, there are kind of 8 different regional fishery management councils. So the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council, where I work, is one of those 8 councils. And so what the job of these regional fishery management councils is to kind of conserve and manage fish and fisheries in federal waters. And so the system is kind of set up with this regional approach because regulations that may work well in Alaska may not work well in the South Atlantic. So having this kind of regional system of councils allows you to kind of tailor the kind of regulations you put in place on your fisheries to your area. And so the South Atlantic Council itself is kind of headquartered in Charleston, South Carolina, and we're responsible for managing fish in federal waters. So that's 300 to 200 miles offshore from North Carolina down through the Florida Keys. And so what the council does is they make recommendations on regulations that then go to NOAA Fisheries, and NOAA Fisheries with the Secretary of Commerce kind of implement those regulations. So things like size limit, bag limit, that kind of stuff. And so the South Atlantic Council manages over 64 different species of fish and crustaceans. So it's a kind of wide variety of species from snapper grouper to more pelagic species like dolphinfish or mackerel or wahoo. And then we also manage things like shrimp and golden crab, which is the deep water crab, and even things like sargassum seaweed. So it's a really wide variety of species that we kind of manage, and we do it over a really broad geographic area, all the way from the North Carolina-Virginia line down through the Florida Keys. So in order to make decisions about regulations, we need a lot of data. However, there are limited resources to collect data, and so that's one of the reasons that the South Atlantic Council became interested in citizen science. And so so the council has all of these longstanding data needs. We had been consistently hearing from fishermen in our region that they wanted to help provide the data used to manage their fisheries. And so citizen science can provide that opportunity. And so that led the council to pursue and launch a citizen science program. And it's really cool because the South Atlantic Council is the only one of those 8 different regional fishery management councils that has a specific citizen science program. So to get the program started, back in 2016, we held a workshop where we brought together over 60 kind of fishermen and scientists and managers and outreach specialists and kind of brainstormed about if we wanted a citizen science program in our region, what would we want it to do? What kind of projects would we want it to build and support? And so what came out of that, we called our program blueprint, but it was basically a roadmap for kind of how we wanted to build our program. So the program is really focused on trying to collect data to fill data gaps that are specific to the South Atlantic Council's research needs. We really wanted to make sure we were providing supplemental information, and that we weren't kind of replacing other data sets that were available, but we were helping supplement and kind of fill data gaps or data holes. And then we really want to make sure that the information collected through our projects can help inform management decisions, so regulatory decisions. And then we also really wanted to make sure that the projects, we really want there to be fishermen and scientists collaboration. And so that's a little bit about the program. And now I'm going to dive into our Fishery project. So In the South Atlantic US, a lot of the finfish kind of harvest, what's caught, is dominated by recreational fisheries. But a lot of our kind of recreational monitoring programs didn't begin until the 1970s. However, we know that recreational fishing was happening before then. You can read accounts from Ernest Hemingway or Zane Grey and hear about kind of all of the kind of amazing fishing trips that they were taking and what they were catching. And so having a way to better understand what was caught and the size of the fish that were caught back in that historic time period can help improve our understanding of that historic fishery, but also learning more about that historic fishery can help us better understand our fisheries today. So there's something called a stock assessment, which basically looks at a fish population and says how well it's doing or how not well it's doing. And a lot of those stock assessments look at data over a long period of time. Many of the stock assessments in our region, the South Atlantic region, start prior to the 1970s. So there's not a lot of information on these historic fisheries. And so having more information can help inform those population models. And so when I talk a little bit about how fishery gets started, I can't do that without talking about Rusty Hudson. So Rusty Hudson is a kind of fisherman out of Daytona Beach, Florida. And this is a picture of Rusty back when he was 7 or 8 years old. He's from kind of a multi-generational fishing family. And so he grew up going out on his uncle and grandfather's boats when he was 7 or 8, and he first got on boats as a bait boy. And so this is a more recent picture of Rusty. Again, he's from the Daytona Beach area of Florida and actually fished out of Ponce Inlet, which is about where that kind of orange star is on the map. His family had kind of a fleet of fishing boats. The three on the screen are three of the ones that he worked on over the years, the Broadbill, the Mako, and the Flamingo. He got his start on the Mako. That was his first trips out were on the Mako as a bait boy. And so in addition to kind of Rusty being a fisherman, he also kind of serves informally as his family's historian. And so his family had a ton of these historic fishing photos because at the end a lot of these kind of for hire fishing trips, a lot of times it was a kind of tradition to get back to the dock, to hang up what was caught on these kind of wooden leaderboards, and then to take a commemorative photo kind of in front of the boards. And so those historic photos are kind of an untapped source of information for what was caught back in this historic time period. And Rusty had gathered hundreds and hundreds of these photos from his family's fishing fleet, and he knew they were really valuable and had a lot of wonderful information. So he would come to meetings and share kind of boxes of these photos with folks. And so thanks to Rusty and some other scientists, the idea for Fishery was spurred. And so the Fishery project itself has kind of three main components. First, we're really just trying to digitize and archive a lot of these historic fishing photos. Many people who have these historic photos aren't going to be around forever. And I think the photos really show kind of the culture and heritage of fishing kind of throughout the South Atlantic region. So first, we're trying to digitize and archive these photos. The second component of the project is we're really trying to estimate what was caught in these photos. And so analyze the data and unlock the data in the photos. So we do that using an online crowdsourcing platform called Zooniverse. So Zooniverse is a really cool website. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, I would encourage you to do so. But Zooniverse allows you to kind of upload photos and build a project online, create kind of tutorials and training materials where you can have people from all over the world help you analyze those photos. So in the case of Fishery, we're training and putting together tutorials to help have folks help us count and identify the fish in these photos. Within the project, we have multiple volunteers looking at each photo, and when there's a lot of volunteer disagreement, we have a team of fish ID experts that are fishermen and scientists that help confirm what's in the photo. And then the third component of the project is we are really trying to develop a method to estimate the size of fish in these historic photos. So we're using kind of the lumber and the leaderboards where those fish were hanging as a scale to estimate the size of fish. And so we developed the project. we had kind of a pilot project where we were testing out all these kind of new methods and components, and we're really excited that the pilot was successful. And so through the pilot project, we had over 1,370 photos that were archived, thanks to Rusty Hudson. These photos were from the Daytona Beach, Florida area and covered the 1940s to 1970s. For the second component of the project, through the pilot, we had over 2,100 volunteers who helped us analyze about 1,000 of those photos. Our validation team reviewed about 180 of those photos. And what we learned through the pilot is that the data collected by volunteers can really help us show kind of trends for some of the key species found most frequently in the photos. And then the third component of the project, all of the king mackerel in those photos that were archived were measured, and we made kind of length compositions showing kind of the size of those fish over time. And so just to give you a little taste of some of the data that we gathered from these photos. Oh, hey, BeBe, do we have a question?
I just wanted to ask really quickly, um, can you explain, just because I saw that you were talking about recreational data and then I saw that these were for hire. Could you just explain really quickly the difference of that for the folks?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And so a lot of these photos are from for hire fishing trips. So that's when kind of a group would pay to go fishing on a boat with a captain. And so there are generally two types of for hire kind of boats. One is a head boat where you kind of pay per head. So a person would come fishing their larger boats. They can take out, depending on the size of the boat and their permits, anywhere from 6 to 50 to even 70 kind of people. And so folks go on the boat to fish for the day and come back. Charter boats are generally a little bit smaller, and normally it'll be a group of folks who want to go fishing together that typically know each other, and they'll pay to go out on kind of that smaller boat with kind of 6 or fewer people to go fishing. So that's for hire fishing. And then private boat anglers are people who just like to go fishing and will go out on their own boat or their friend's boat, that sort of thing. Does that
Yeah,
make
and
sense? Maybe
that's considered recreational. So, okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, BeBe. All right. Great question. And so just to share a little bit of the information that we've kind of gathered from the photos for the pilot project, this graph I'm going to show you is going to look at kind of length compositions or the kind of sizes of fish we saw from the photos by decade. So if you look at kind of the size composition from the 1950s, you can kind of see that the highest number of the size of fish that we saw, or the mode, was 29 inches fork length. If you look at the 1960s, you can see that that kind of top point or mode kind of shifts smaller. So we were seeing kind of smaller fish. And then if you look at the 1970s, you can see this shift to seeing a lot of these larger fish. So these length data wouldn't be available from this historic time period unless there was a project like Fishery. So it's really exciting that we're able to kind of gather so much data from these old historic photos. And so some of what we learned from the pilot project was that these methods or components to the project that we developed showed a lot of promise. We're able to kind of gather a lot of great data, and volunteers made really valuable contributions to the project in multiple ways. Rusty volunteered his photos, his family's photos. So we've gotten kind of photo providers as volunteers. We had volunteers in Zooniverse who helped us count and identify fish in all of these historic photos. We had volunteers who served on our validation team that helped kind of confirm what was in a photo when there was lots of volunteer disagreement. And then we had kind of length analysts who volunteer their time to measure the size of fish in these photos. So volunteers were a huge part of this project and made contributions in lots of different ways. We also learned a lot of things through the pilot. And one of the things we learned is that by trying to simplify our data collection a little bit more, we might be able to improve data quality. So before we relaunched the project, we tried to kind of simplify the ways volunteers would gather information from these photos. And then the last kind of takeaway, which is maybe the most exciting to me, is that fishermen seemed really interested in sharing their stories and their historic photos. So when we were talking about the pilot project, with kind of fishermen and some of the communities around the South Atlantic, many of them said, oh, I have photos like that. Or there's a restaurant kind of in my community that has all these historic fishing photos on the wall. And so people were really interested in kind of sharing their photos with the project, which we were really excited about. And so we are excited that we were able to get some additional funding to grow the project. And so the first thing to grow the project is we wanted to try to archive more photos from across the South Atlantic region. So for our pilot project, Rusty provided photos from that Daytona Beach area of Florida. And so in order from the data collected from those photos to kind of represent the full South Atlantic, we need to have photos from across the full South Atlantic. So over the past, I guess it's been about 18 months now, we've been working hard to gather more photos. And so we've done this in lots of different ways. We've held kind of photo scanning events in communities. We've had kind of some folks who are on our advisory panels help connect us to folks within their communities or connect us to libraries in their communities or restaurants in their communities. And then we've also kind of posted information on social media or via online communications. And we've had some folks reach out to us kind of that way to share photos from their family's kind of fishing fleet. So it's been really exciting to watch the project go. And so we started out with just having kind of photos from this kind of Daytona Beach, Florida area. And now I'm really excited to share that we have photos from the Outer Banks down through the Florida Keys. And to just show kind of a few example photos we've gotten from across the region, this is one that is from Morehead City, North Carolina. That was provided if anyone's been up that way. There's a restaurant called the Sanitary Fish House and Restaurant that's been around forever. And so this was a photo that was on their wall from charter boats that used to run out of that region. And then here off of Charleston, South Carolina, there's a captain who runs out of Isle of Palms Marina, Chuck Griffin, who provided kind of photos from the 1980s from his kind of charter fishing trips. We also have photos from Savannah. And so Captain Judy Helmy, who you can see right here, is a charter captain that's been working in that area for a really long time. She provided this photo from, believe this one is from the 1970s. And then we have some down from the Florida Keys. There's a captain who's retired now, Skip Nielsen, who works out of Bud Mary's Marina, and he shared hundreds of his photos with us too. So through the project, we now have over 2,300 photos that have been contributed to it by, now it's over 14 providers. We were able to scan some photos down in Daytona Beach area last week, again, when we were down there doing some other outreach events. So we're thrilled by kind of how we've been able to kind of grow the archive over time. And if you look at kind of the photos that we've collected so far, if you look at it by decade, the majority of photos are from the 1960s, followed by the 1950s and 70s. And if you look at the percentage of photos by month, you can see we have photos that represent trips every month of the year, but the majority of photos are from kind of that April to August time period, which likely was similar to when the kind of charter and headboat fishing guys were busiest throughout the year, when they had the most fishing trips. And so one way we'd love for you to help join our Fishery team is to share. If you know about historic photos, you may have some within your family, or you may know about kind of restaurants or libraries or other kind of organizations in your community that may have them. We'd love for you to share them with the Fishery Project. And there's a QR code in kind of the upper right corner of the screen. You can kind of use that QR code to take you to our website, and it has my contact information. So all you have to do is reach out to me and we can connect to share photos. I did want to talk a little bit about what we're looking for in a Fishery photo. So we need to know kind of the approximate year of kind of the fishing trip that the photo is representing. We'd love for it to be from kind of the South Atlantic states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, or Florida. The fish needs to be taken at the end of a fishing trip where like all the harvested catch is displayed with the anglers who took them. And we're really looking to gather photos that have information on some of the species that the council manages. So snapper, grouper, mackerel, jacks, triggerfish, dolphinfish, wahoo, those sorts of species. So if you're kind of photo kind of answers yes to all those questions, it would be a great fit for the Fishery project. And then we also talk a little bit more about some of the photos we get, not all the photos we get can be used for analysis. So we still archive all photos. We think it's really important to kind of preserve the history of the fishery. But in order to be used for analysis in the project, again, the photo has to be taken at the end of a fishing trip where the kind of harvested catch is displayed. We need a ballpark year. We need to know what state the photo was taken in. And then we like to gather information on the photo provider name and contact. And that's just so we can kind of keep them up to date with what's happening on the project. And then what makes a fish even better for analysis, if those fish are hanging on a leaderboard, then we're able to get the size of the fish in the photos. If we have more information on kind of date, we can do some seasonal analyses. And then we always love learning more about kind of the captain or the vessel or the dock the fish was working out of, just to learn more about kind of the fishery that was going on in that historic time period. And so here are a few examples of some photos that are great for fishery analysis. This is one of Rusty's photos that he initially provided. You can see we know the exact date, we know the captain's name, we know the boat name, all the fish are hanging on a leaderboard. So that's a great photo for the project. But this is another photo provided by Judy Helmy, another great photo. Although the fish aren't hanging on a leaderboard, so we might not be able to get size, you can see the catch laid out on the dock with all the folks who caught it. So those are both great examples of photos that would work well for kind of analysis in our project. And then there's one other way to join the Fishery team other than just sharing historic photos, and that's to help us analyze the photos through the Zooniverse project. And so to get started with how to kind of join the Fishery project in Zooniverse, I first thought we'd talk a little bit about Fish ID. So in the project online, volunteers go through kind of quick tutorials and are trained how to identify and count fish in these historic photos. And we have a field guide that kind of walks through steps on how you can help ID all these different fish species. And so wanted to see if any of the attendees may be willing to help us kind of think more about what some of the characteristics might be that you could use to help identify fish in these photos. So are there certain kind of tips or tricks that you guys may know about to help identify fish? And so if anyone listening in wants to kind of share their ideas, you can chat in the kind of webinar chat window. And then, all right.
They might be shy.
That's right.
Does anybody have any guesses? So how about using markings or coloring?
That's a great suggestion. So kind of different fish have different kind of shading or coloration. So you can use kind of those to help you key in on identification features. One of the things that gets a little tricky in some of these fishery photos is they're black and white photos. So a lot of times you may not have that color, but you can still see shading, or some of the fish have stripes or spots or that sort of thing. So that's a great example of one way to help identify fish in photos.
And how about shape of the caudal fin or shape of the tail?
That's another great example. Fish have different kind of, sometimes they'll have a very narrow forked tail that kind of looks like this. Sometimes you won't see a fork. So that shape of the tail is a great way to help identify fish. And then another thing that's really helpful to use too is just shape of the whole body. Different fish are shaped in different ways based on, you know, where and how they live and how they eat, that sort of thing. So just shape of the body, shape of the mouth, lots of different kind of characteristics you can key in on. Where the fins are kind of on the body can help you identify one fish species from another. So gills, so we got a question. So yep, so that's a great example because in some of these photos you'll have fish, but you'll also have sharks. And so the way the gills are in those two different kind of types of species can help you identify specifically between those two types of fish. Oh, another one, mouth position. That's exactly right. Great. Another great suggestion. The mouth position can not only help you with identifications, but it helps you learn more about where that fish lives in the water column and how they eat. So lots of great ideas coming through the chat. So there are obviously some people listening in who know their fish, so to speak. All right. Thanks, guys. So if you joined the Fishery project, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how you help gather data. So in the project, we have 4 different levels. So the first level is the easiest level, and this is where you're just counting the total number of fish and total number of people in the project. So there's kind of a click and point tool where you just kind of make a click on all of the people, and then make a click with a different color on all of the fish in the photo. So that's level 1. Level 2 is when you're counting and identifying kind of king mackerel, which is this fish here, grouper species in general, and sailfish. And so you're just looking through photos trying to identify those 3 species. After you do a number of level 2 photos, a few level 2 photos, level 3 unlocks. And you're identifying red snapper, amberjack species, and any species of sharks within a photo. Once you do a few level 3 photos, level 4 unlocks, and this is the last level where you're really trying to count and identify dolphin fish, cobia, gray triggerfish, and little tunny. So each level within each photo, you're just kind of identifying 3 or 4 fish per photo. BeBe, all right.
I'm just gonna say, I think I could get to level 4 before I could get to level 3. But
You know,
but
we've heard that from some of our volunteers.
well, and that was what I was gonna ask. It seems like you kind of have a little bit of something for everyone. Is there a minimum age for identifying and classifying?
So I guess what I'll say is when we typically talk about the project, we normally will share it with kind of high school level kids and older, up to however old you want to be able to kind of mark things on a website. But I will say there are a number of very avid fishermen who are younger than high school age. And so we've had folks participate in the project at younger ages than that are really great fishermen and they know their fish. So folks who are kind of younger than that, middle school age, that sort of thing, who know their fish may get a kick out of this project too.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So in Fishery, this link will take you to our Zooniverse webpage where you can join the project. But before kind of bringing up that page, I thought it might be fun to do a little bit of practicing fish ID if y'all are up for it. And so I wanted to show just one of our kind of Fishery photos and wanted to see if folks might be willing to try to identify that fish that's circled there. It's zoomed in on here, and then it's one of these 4 species. So this is the fish we're looking at, and then it's either a little tunny, a cobia, a barracuda, or a king mackerel. So if you have a guess on what it might be, feel free to chat it in the webinar chat, and then we can talk a little bit about kind of what the fish is after that. And don't be shy. All right. All right. You guys, we have some fish ID experts on. So we have 2 folks that said king mackerel, and y'all, or 3, everybody said king mackerel. Nice job, y'all. That's exactly what it is. So king mackerel, I think some key characteristics to be able to identify king mackerel are kind of, they have this long torpedo thin kind of shaped body, and they have this kind of silvery color, which you can't see the color in this black and white photo, but you can still see that it's kind of silvery. Another great thing to look at, like BeBe mentioned earlier, is the shape of that caudal fin here. It's a really kind of sharply forked tail here. And then you can look at kind of their sharply kind of pointed mouth. So you guys, 100%, great job on this one. How about we try one more? So this next one, so king mackerel, great job. Next one is this kind of photo here. We're going to try to identify this fish here that's zoomed in a little bit. And this fish is either a cobia, an amberjack, a dolphin fish, or a little tunny. So does anyone have any guesses of what kind of fish this might be? All right, we have cobia. Cobia? All right. You guys are right on. So that's a cobia. And so lot of you can use many of the same similar tools. You can see that cobia have this torpedo shaped body, but it's a little wider than the king mackerel are. You can see this kind of forked tail, but it's not as wide, as kind of sharply forked or narrowly forked as kind of king mackerel. And with cobia too, although this is a black and white photo, you can look at this shading. You can see that kind of the dark shading on top with the white belly, and then can look at kind of the way the mouth kind of is upturned a little bit at the end. So you guys know your IDs. I'm really impressed. We have one more. This is going to be the trickiest one yet, but I bet you guys can nail it. So one more photo. So here's the photo. We're going to try to identify this fish there. So I'm going to zoom in, and it's a grouper. And so we're trying to identify what grouper this kind of smaller one right here is. And this one is tricky. So let's see kind of what your guesses are on this guy. And don't be scared to guess. So we got a gag. All right, anybody else have ideas? We got a Warsaw. All right. Any other guesses? All right, so both good guesses. Again, this is the trickiest one. We have scamp, we got a scamp. All right, so good. These are great guesses. I will say in Zooniverse, you don't have to identify grouper to species. You'll just say it's a grouper. But we wanted to do kind of a trickier ID here just for fun. And so this one is actually a red grouper. And groupers can be tricky, especially in these black and white photos, to try to identify. All groupers have the same kind of body shape that's a little bit kind of wider than what we saw with the torpedo-shaped king mackerel and cobia. If you look at their tails, they don't have those forked tails. They have kind of kind of a wide tail, and in the case of scamp grouper, it has a lot. They often have a lot of kind of filaments hanging off the tail. A fisherman actually gave me tips of how to identify red grouper in these photos. Red grouper kind of have more of a short, squatty, wider body than gag or scamp. Warsaw can have kind of that wider body too. But then if you see here, it's kind of faint, but you can see kind of a ribbing across the kind of side of a red grouper. It's a fisherman who said, when you see that ribbing, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a red grouper. So those are kind of the clues to help you identify a red grouper in these photos. But again, in fishery, you'll just be identifying, hey, this fish is a grouper. You don't have to go to species. That's something we can do on our end, on the back end. So I will say, everyone online, I'm really impressed and with your ID skills, and would love to have you join the Fishery project. And so what I'll say real quick is I'll just pull up the Fishery project on the screen. So give me just a second. All right, and so this is the Fishery project. When you get to the main page, what you'll see is you'll see different kind of, the levels will be kind of locked and unlocked here. Right now in the project, all of our data have been analyzed except for kind of level 4. However, we just got a new big batch of photos. So in the next month, we'll be adding new photos to the project where all levels will be unlocked again. When you go to collect data in the project, you just click on one of these levels, and then you'll see kind of a photo pop up here, and then a task here, and there's a tutorial that will walk you through what you're going to do within a project. So within each project, it kind of tells you what fish you're going to identify, helps you remember that you don't have to squint. You can zoom in on photos and move the photos around to be able to identify what's in the photo. We talk a little bit about basic fish structure and show you kind of examples of the different tail types you might see, that sort of thing. You then get a kind of heads up on the species you'll be identifying on each level. And then we'll give you a few other directions. Sometimes you'll see large wheelbarrows of fish. You don't need to count fish in those photos, or large trash cans of fish. And then we talk a little bit about our field guide, which I'll show you in a second. But then you can get started. And so the field guide itself is broken down into kind of fish structure and helpful ID tips. And then there's some practice photos if you want to try one of the practice photos before getting started. And then we have information on all of the different fish you're asked to identify. So we'll tell you a little bit about the fish. We'll give you some example photos with the fish, tell you about some of the fish that might be kind of easily misidentified with. Lots of great information to kind of help you identify fish within a photo. And then when you're identifying fish itself, all you're doing is clicking on a tool and then clicking on a fish that will count that particular fish within a photo. So it's really easy to do once you get started. We have talk boards where if you have questions about kind of what a fish might be or any questions about the project, you can chat with me and the other researchers on the project. So since you guys we're pretty good at Fish ID, we'd love to have you kind of join the project and kind of help us unlock all the data in these photos. And so that's just a little bit about the Fishery project. Again, we would love for you to join the project or learn more about our citizen science program and keep up with all the different projects we have under it. So again, my contact information is on this screen. I work closely with Meg Withers, who is another council employee who works on the citizen science program. Our contact information is here. We would love to hear from you, and also have a QR code that you can scan to get to our webpage. Oh, BeBe, I just noticed you popped back up. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to, I had a few more questions when you were finished.
I'm good. Take it away.
All right. Well, so, I mean, I think this is super exciting and a great way to get engaged, and you don't even have to leave the house,
That's
which is
right.
great. You can do it in the rain. Um, and so what's the what's your biggest success from or the biggest takeaway that the council's able to have from this participation in Fishery?
Yeah, I think the council's been really excited about how many people have been interested in the project, whether it's, fishermen who are providing photos, or we have volunteers from all over the place, all over the world, really helping us identify and count fish in these photos. And I think it just shows, there are a few kind of stock assessments that are coming up either later this year or next year. And we're going to share the information gathered through this project, particularly some of the length information, with the population model. So these data are going to help us figure out how the fish populations are doing. And we wouldn't have these data without all of the volunteers who've helped us unlock the information in these photos. And so I think it's just, a testament to how important volunteers and others in our community are helping increase the amount of information available on fish species. And we wouldn't be able to do that without all of our fishery volunteers. So I think the council's been really excited about this project, and it's been a great way to talk to folks in the community about a project that might be a little less controversial than what you normally think about fishing regulations and that sort of thing. This is a project that everybody's really gotten behind and is really excited about the information we're learning from it.
That's great. And it really is filling in those gaps and people actually getting to participate in science. So I love that. Um and what um, just for, I mean, obviously you've got some practice ones in there. So, um, they don't need to be shy about learning it, but are there some tips or other things outside that they should practice or look at before signing up?
Well, I'll also say is what we tell volunteers is, you can use our training materials, our field guides. There's lots of other kind of fish ID resources that are available, but don't be afraid to guess. This is a project where we're having multiple people look at each photo. So if you kind of get a species, if you identify a fish wrong, it's not that big of a deal. There are lots of other people who are looking at that photo. And so we're going to get everybody's information together to look at what fish are in that photo. So, don't be scared to guess. If you make a wrong identification, it's not a big deal because we have so many other people analyzing that photo. And, even some of these photos are really tricky. We very lovingly call them dumpster fire photos where there are hundreds of fish, piled on top of each other. And so those are really tricky to do, even if you're, an expert at fish ID. So we have kind of multiple volunteers looking at each photo. We have this validation team that's made up of fish ID experts that are looking at photos that are kind of more of these dumpster fire photos. So I would say don't be scared to just jump in the project. And if you don't know a lot about fish ID at the beginning, this can help you hone your fish ID skills. And you can take those with you when you go out on the water to catch fish too. So I think that's what we try to emphasize to people is don't worry if you're not a fish ID expert. You don't have to be to join this project. And even, the level 1 photos, which will be kind of available to everyone once we add our new photos into the project. In that, on that level 1, all you're doing is counting the number of fish and the number of people. So that's an easy way to get involved in the project, get kind of more used to kind of marking fish. And then once you're comfortable, you can move up to the other levels. But if you want to stick with level 1 the whole time, you can do that too. So I think there's lots of avenues for people to get involved. And the more you kind of learn and get comfortable with Fish ID, the more you can kind of move up the levels. So yeah, that's what we normally try to share with people when they join the project.
Awesome. That is kind of a relief because I am not the best at fish ID. And yes, my sister will make fun of me about that in the future. So yeah, I'm gonna have to be honing my skills and polishing up. Does anybody else in the chat have any questions they want to drop in for Julia? And we will again share your QR code and your contact information following this webinar so that if people do have questions, they can reach out directly to you. Definitely don't ask me for fish ID advice. Julia is your person.
I don't know
With
about
all
that, BeBe. You know your
yes,
Fish ID
yes.
pretty well.
And but yes, we'll get that available for everybody. Julia, anything else you want to share?
Other than just thank you guys for listening in, and BeBe and the rest of the folks at South Carolina Wildlife Federation, thanks so much for helping kind of spread the word about the Fishery project. Really excited to get more folks involved, and I know the folks online did great with Fish ID, so we'd love to have you join the project. And kind of that's it, other than, thank you for having me. Really excited to share information on Fishery on your Wild Webinar Wednesday. Wild Wednesday webinar?
Wild Wednesday webinars. Yes, we'll go with whatever you say. Yeah. But well, thank you again, Julia. Thank you so much for all the great information and for the ways that we can get involved. And like I said, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us. On the screen now is our general mailbox for the South Carolina Wildlife Federation. And we also would like to know how we did. So that QR code right there will give us a little heads up on uh, how we handled this webinar, and hopefully you enjoyed it and learned something. I know I did. And yeah, look, Savannah said she learned so much. Um, but we will send, and if you did enjoy this webinar and you feel so inclined to reach out to us at the Wildlife Federation, to show your financial support, we would love to have you join the Wildlife Federation too. We will send a follow-up email, like I said, and we'll have some contact information, information about the fishery program. And like Julie said, if you've got family or relatives or restaurants in your community that have those photos that you'd like to share, that would be great too. Definitely filling in those data gaps and making great decisions for fisheries in our South Atlantic region. So we appreciate it. So we hope that you'll join us again, and we do have